May we start?
I want to get your opinion on something.
To the bigger picture. Now it's time.
From B Media Production, this is Podcasting Essentials.
Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of season 4. I'm Nick Schildberger, Managing Director of B Media Production. From podcast movement evolutions to privacy in podcasting and what's ahead in 2020. On this episode, we discuss all the latest podcasting trends with Omny Studio's Managing Director, Sharon Taylor. But first, I'm joined by my co-host, Nicole Goodman. Hey, Nick.
Hi, Nick. It's great to have Sharon Taylor back with us, good friend of the show. But before we go any further, we really should address the elephant in the room or in each of our rooms because we're not actually sitting together in the studio.
No, COVID-19 has caused us to officially close our studio, which means we are all working remotely and with a few challenges, but we're still here. That's the main thing.
We are still here, raring to go. The podcasts keep coming. So, we're just working away. Thank goodness. Not as many people are so lucky.
No, that's right. It's going to be a very tough year. And I guess while we're discussing COVID-19, we should, talk about how, so far, it's still early days, what's going on in the world of podcasting in a COVID-19 environment.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting to see that downloads have been steady, but they are moving to later in the day as people's habits change, as they're staying home a lot more often. Some say they're up a bit, some say they're down, but they're generally just shifting time of day.
Yeah, I think it really depends on each individual. I mean, I guess we're all, or a lot of us are working from home and that creates completely different habits that we're not used to. I know myself, I'm finding it harder to listen to podcasts because I've got kids running around. I'm trying to look after them. I'm trying to work. I'm not driving my car hardly at all at the moment, which means that was a place where I listened to a lot of podcasts. But I'm so committed to podcasts, I'm finding ways to listen. And I guess it really just depends, different people are going to be doing different things.
Yeah, that's right. And not having kids myself, I'm still finding my habits are changing, but I do have a little bit more time than you, Nick. So apologies for that. But still listening where I can.
Hey, the positive is I'm spending a lot of time with my family. So
that's right. That's exactly right.
That's a good thing. One thing that is definitely in much higher demand is news podcasts, which comes as no surprise.
No surprise at all. There's a glut of coronavirus podcasts and also people are just clamouring to get the news, to get the trusted word on what's actually happening and how they can be safe.
And some are predicting that ad revenue might be down a bit, but I guess we'll have to wait and see a bit on that. We're still pretty early days.
Yeah, and look, that's understandable as people try and hold on to some spending. But also, if you want to test the waters, I think podcasting can tend to be really good value for money, particularly in a climate like this.
One thing for sure is there's a lot more remote recording going on when it comes to podcasting. And I thought we should just take a couple of minutes to give a little bit of advice around remote recording, what we're doing right now. It is challenging. It's much harder when you can't see the person across the other side of the studio, but it's what we have to do right now. And there are lots of people out there grappling with it. So I thought we could just from a higher level, we're grappling with it a little bit ourselves. We're having issues with internet connections. We're having issues with some of the remote recording software that we use because it's under such high demand. But there are heaps of different ways you can record remotely. Our preferred option is Source Connect, which we're using now. But you can also use things like Squadcast or Zoom or Zencaster or CleanFeed. But no matter what you use, there are a few tips that I guess, Nicole, we should share now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the key thing to say is while there are teething problems, as with anything online, it's not a difficult process, it's not overwhelming, and it can be easily done. So podcasts can be managed remotely just as easily as they can be done in a studio.
So what are the tips? If you're a guest on a podcast, what should you have or what do you need to do?
I think the first thing to say is find yourself a quiet space, preferably a small space enclosed with ideally carpet. Wooden floors tend to give a lot of echo. So, some people go into their closet and sit amongst their clothes. They sit in the car and they record there. But if you've got a quiet space that you can even just put a towel on the table, something to just absorb the sound, that'll go a long way to producing some good quality sound. Headsets, as simple as having your Apple headphones. It has a compact little mic within the cord, so that's something that also gives good sound. And your set, I mean, that's really all you need. And Wi-Fi connection. And that's it.
Yeah, I would actually suggest that if you can plug an Ethernet cable into your computer rather than relying on Wi-Fi, that's going to perform better. And when it comes to a microphone, the better the microphone you can get, obviously, the better the result's going to be. If you're producing a podcast with a regular guest, like we do with some of our shows, we've sent them a microphone. And you can get a microphone for around $100, which does a very, very good job. Much better than you would get on a mobile phone headset. Other things to not use, if you can avoid it, try not to use Bluetooth headphones like AirPods. Anytime that you're sending something over Bluetooth, it's going to get compressed and there's other things that can interfere. So try and get a microphone you can plug in a quiet room. And really that's the main point, isn't it? Yeah,
that's right. It's not complicated at all. But if you follow those steps, then you should be absolutely fine.
Now, before we get to Sharon Taylor, the other thing I want to quickly touch on is the role of podcasting right now during this tough year ahead. How can brands and businesses be using podcasting in ways that they may not have even considered?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you see that there are a lot of public events and conferences not running, and rightly so, given the circumstances. But it doesn't need to mean the end of disseminating that information. You can very easily turn parts of it or the whole event into a podcast. So if you just think a little bit more about other ways of engaging people during this time, audio is a great way to do it and engage people while they actually have the time to do so.
Yeah, events, conferences, like you said, and also private podcasts or internal podcasts for businesses. So with everybody working remotely, communication and staying connected is going to be more important than ever. And I think there's a role there for podcasting as well. So if any of our listeners out there want help turning content, maybe stuff you've already recorded in the past, or you've got Zoom calls that you now want to package up and get out to your audience or your customers, then please contact us. We're more than happy to help with any audio concerns that you have. We can help with remote recording. We're still running 2 full-time studios, albeit one in Melbourne and one actually in South Australia because of the conditions. But that means that we can still monitor audio and we can help all the way through the process of recording, producing and distributing a podcast.
Yeah, and look, any questions, give us a call and we're here to help in whatever way we can. Now, we recently caught up with Sharon Taylor, the MD of Omny Studio, to get her thoughts on the year ahead in podcasting. So from Sharon's home studio, here's the interview.
Hey Sharon, welcome back to Podcasting Essentials.
Thank you, good to be back.
Albeit this time not in the studio with us due to the coronavirus. And at the time of recording this, it is already all-consuming and I presume it will only become even more all-consuming. So while we're on the topic of COVID-19, how is it going to affect podcasting?
Oh, it's very early days, isn't it? But I think audio in general is one of those things that will persevere through this. In a time where you need more news sources than ever before, people will be tuning into the radio, will be listening to podcasts, etc. I think listener habits will change though. So for myself, I usually listen to the same 3 or 4 podcasts on the way to work. My commute is now gone, and so that's going to change and I'll find new habits about podcast listening. Maybe I'll start listening more on smart speakers and we'll see smart speaker adoption go up. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
And just podcasts on COVID-19 itself. I mean, we're in the middle of March as we record this and there's already a heap of new podcasts. I'm sure you've seen a heap of them on the Omny platform.
Oh, there's tons. I mean, there's daily coronavirus news podcasts. I'm going to make one about social etiquette in a now non-handshaking world. I think there's a lot of opportunities for content, but no, we're seeing a huge flux of them. And it's an amazing way for people that may be specialists in their fields to start getting more awareness or spreading out word. Podcasts are generally a trusted medium, and because it is intimate and because you do rely on the host so much, I think that we're going to see even more over the next couple of weeks.
I think it's also a testament to the ability of podcasts to take a niche approach, and COVID-19 just falls into that bracket perfectly.
Oh, 100%.
Now, Sharon, the last time we spoke to you was about August, September 2019. What's been happening at Omny Studio since then?
Well, we're all mandated work from home, so we're enjoying that.
Yes.
But we've been busy building away into the system. So we've obviously further built our advertising capabilities. So we've built more into our campaign manager so people can do targeted advertising. We have done an integration with rev.com so that we can do human-generated transcripts. We've built in some new comparison analytics functionality so people can see how episodes go after a few days.
Amazing.
We've been busy. We did a Podchaser integration. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that, but
Tell us a bit about it.
Podchaser is a group of people that want to make searching for podcast content easier. So they're calling themselves the IMDb of podcasting. A lot like Apple's hosts and guests, but a little bit more built out. And so if I had a Podchaser profile, every time I appeared on a podcast, I could be tagged by creators, so by you guys. And if anyone really wants to hear more of me on other shows that I've been on, I would appear and you could do a search for like Sharon Taylor. And you could do that for other guests that people have had on the show. And so it's a nice way of extending search in podcasting, I think.
Brilliant idea.
Anything that increases discoverability is a good thing.
Oh, for sure.
Now, you recently attended Podcast Movement Evolutions, which, for those that don't know, was the first time that Podcast Movement, the biggest podcast conference in the world, ran a second event on the west coast of the United States, back when you were allowed to fly.
And have gatherings of more than 500 people.
That's
Yes.
right.
Well, how many people were there?
They say that they had somewhere between 11 and 1,300.
Okay, so
That's amazing.
That is big, yeah.
It's huge.
So it's, what, 2/3 of their big scale version?
Correct. Yeah, it's the first time they've run Evolutions, and so it's targeted more towards an industry professional crowd and those that wanted next level. It wasn't so much as beginners getting out there. It was an interesting event. All the usual players, lots of brands coming out to play, all the large networks, artist agencies and things. It was very vibrant in terms of who went and what we covered.
Do you think there are more brands turning up to these events as they take place?
I think so, for sure. Nicole just did his Hot Pod Summit and MasterCard sponsored it. And they're an advertiser and a brand that's really heavily into the space.
Yeah. What were some of the other big takeaways?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing hot off the press was the fact that we've now launched, the industry has now launched the Academy Awards of podcasting. And so moving it more towards I don't want to say legitimate, but a much more globally aware platform in terms of like Oscars and TV and movies. Is podcasting getting a platform to do awards in that level, which was interesting. Lots of tips and tricks and talk about how to get more podcast content in the ears of listeners. Discovery was a big thing. Advertising is always a huge thing there. Privacy is something that's really coming up in the space. There was a lot of talk about that around the traps.
Yeah, do you want to dig a little bit deeper into privacy, or is it...
Is it too private?
Yeah.
Yeah, privacy is a tricky one in podcasting. The whole idea about privacy with things like CCPA or GDPR, which are privacy legislation in different regions of the world, is the need to get opt-in or opt-out consent to people who are receiving advertising or maybe are starting to get targeted by ads. And targeting in podcasting is a really nascent piece of tech. And so we're trying to make sure that we are ahead of the curve on privacy as an industry, because it's very hard if someone's listening to a show and listening to an ad. They don't know if that is a random ad or if it's something that has been targeted to them, what personal data they're sending back to the hosting platform. And there's a lot of different players that are involved as well. So getting ahead of that as these privacy legislations come more to the forefront this year, which I think we'll see, to make sure that listeners are informed of the ads that they're being served, how they're being served, and what their opt-out choices are.
Yeah, it's probably going to make your life more difficult, but for consumers, I guess, having these discussions around privacy is a good thing.
I think so. I mean, the reason that podcasting is so amazing is because the trust is there and it isn't a mass media. No one wants podcasting to become like the internet, where I bought a fridge once and the internet thinks it's my inaugural fridge purchase and I'm having a collection. And so every single time I log onto a website, I see another fridge ad. And so everyone wants to protect the sanctity of podcasting. And so we have to be really thoughtful about what we do as we extend advertising capabilities. We need to be doing everything in a very thoughtful, mindful way. And how do we move podcasting from our percentage of listenership now? We are, as of date of recording, 2 days away from hearing the next Infinite Dial presentation from the US. And so we'll see how much podcast consumership has increased. I assume it's going to have increased. Let's all be positive at this point in time. And so,
I think it's safe to say it will have increased. It'll just be interesting to see by what number it has increased.
Yeah.
I've got some good money on riding on a certain percentage number. Like there's some of us in the industry that bet on it. So fingers crossed.
Do you want to share that now?
I hope that it goes up to 54% listening in the States.
So Spotify, it keeps pushing ahead and they're now heavily investing in global markets, including Australia, developing original podcasts and exclusive content, which seems pretty good for the industry down here. What do you think, Sharon?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think just after I got back from Podcast Movement, Spotify announced the fact that in Australia they were going to create some original content. Obviously in America, Spotify's been on a shopping spree with content creation companies for quite a while. And so they've always been thinking about doing this. And it's nice to see that it's come down to Australia as well. I am of two minds about it. One is largely more content is great for the space. More awareness that a brand like Spotify gives to podcasting is beneficial for all of us and the entire space. Spotify is now not just a platform, but they're also a competitor to a lot of publishers out there. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they manage that duopoly relationship moving forward.
Yeah, but I've said before that good content always rises to the top as well. So I don't think it's something we should fear at this point.
No, and especially for the BE Media clients, Spotify's not about to go out there and start making branded content. They're going to make narrative format content. They're going to make original series and those types of things. And so what they focus on means that there's opportunities there for other people to get in their own swim lane with content.
Now, Apple is on a hiring spree. What's actually going on here? We've seen that
what's ever going on with Apple?
That's right. We've seen there's positions like product manager personalisation. That sounds exciting for all of us.
Yeah, I think for a long while Apple's been criticised in the space for being this kind of large but largely dormant player. And whether or not you agree with those criticisms or think they're fair, they've done small tweaks to their Apple podcasting interface. They've introduced their own version of host and guest. They've kept making moves. But these hires that they're about to make, and I think there's a good number of them, anywhere from 20 to 40 on their website in terms of engineering and front-end design, partnerships managing, personalization that you described. And these are exciting things. It's wonderful to think that in 2020, Apple are going to be putting these resources into things that will benefit the end consumer and get more people listening in the space. I'm very positive about it. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do this year.
Yeah, and look, there's nothing like a bit of competitive energy from Spotify that's really lit the spark on this, and it's good to see Apple jumping back into development in this area.
Yeah, from a consumer point of view, to have an arms race between Spotify, Google and Apple would not be a bad thing.
No.
No. It's going to be interesting to see how they differentiate in the space as well. Like Google is obviously mostly about search. Spotify is about building out a holistic audio platform that you can listen to everything in the one interface. Apple's really more been focusing on splitting out music versus podcasts versus everything. And their takes on how their consumers want to consume and be suggested content as well is going to be different. So it's really going to be interesting to watch them play it out. And it's great that all of them are kind of getting into it at the same pace.
Yep.
Yes, it's all very, very positive.
Well, that leads to my final question, Sharon, and we love to test you with a crystal ball. What's ahead this year in podcasting?
Oh, forecasts. What's that saying? Even a broken clock is right twice a day. So
right.
If I throw out enough, I've got to hit something in the middle of the dartboard, surely. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to watch Spotify, Google, Apple and other large players enter the space and what they do for listening. I would hope that at the end of the year we see podcast consumption hovering up around the 70 to 75% mark. I mean, that's a huge increase. If they all at the same time push it in their platforms, it's very possible. I think that we're going to see more and more and more advertising technology come into the space, we are going to get to the point where you can target an ad to a 35 to 40-year-old female that enjoys X, Y, and Z brands, and that's going to be interesting. I'd like to say that there's going to be more and more consolidation, and I hope that there's not going to be businesses shut down, especially with the economies that we're about to move into. But I think that might mean that people kind of start banding together a little bit more.
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
I think the format of content's going to change. I think with Spotify doing their daily drive, I think as more and more players enter the space, we're going to see different types of content to match and to suit short commutes or to be more applicable to be bought or to be featured by the Spotifys and Apples of the world in that way. If they all do start building out, so that personalization role at Apple, if they do start building out a daily commute playlist, for instance, you kind of want your show to be of a length that suits that. So I think we're going to see a lot of different content styles that come out. And then hopefully just a whole lot more podcast listening is my prayer for this year.
I think that prediction about increasing listenership is a pretty safe one, but one that we can all definitely look forward to for the remainder of the year. Well, thanks so much, Sharon, for joining us. Hopefully next time it will be back in the studio so we can see your lovely face as well.
Yeah, we miss having you here.
Good luck with your role at Omny Studio this year as we navigate a difficult period, but hopefully one that podcasting can help people through in some way.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure that we'll be back to shaking hands and face-to-face contact and out of social isolation, but it's amazing that I've still been able to do this, and thank you for having me, even if remotely.
Absolute pleasure. And look after yourself. Take care. Wash your hands.
Yes, 20 seconds listening to your favourite podcast. People, that's an idea. 20-second podcast content.
Smart speakers. There you go.
That's it. The hand washing podcast. Someone will do it.
Someone will do it.
Someone will do it.
Let's go do
They'll
it now.
make more
Quick.
money than all of us.
Thanks so much, Sharon.
See ya.
Thank you.
Well, it's been done.
What's been done?
A podcast about washing your hands.
No way.
And not just one. I just did a search before we started recording, and there are tens of podcasts about washing your hands. There are 15-second ones, which, by the way, is too short. 30-second ones. There are 20-minute shows about washing hands. I'm not sure how much they talk about washing hands in a 20-minute show, but Sharon was definitely ahead of her time because there is no shortage of podcasts about washing your hands.
And see, that's the beauty of podcasting and how quick and easily you can do it. It's phenomenal. I think that's brilliant.
It is. Now, Sharon also mentioned Edison Research's Infinite Dial that was released on the 19th of March, which was just after we recorded with Sharon. Now, she mentioned that she hoped that the total number of people that have ever listened to a podcast in the US would increase from 51% last year, which was the watershed moment, to what she had placed her bet at 54%. Well, I'm sorry to say, Sharon won't win the bet because it was actually 55%.
Yeah, pipped at the post by one was Sharon.
Hey, but that's 155 million people that have listened to a podcast in the US in the last 12 months.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Now, we're going to speak to someone from Edison Research on an upcoming episode of Podcasting Essentials to go into a bit more detail about the results of that survey. But we're going to wait until the Australian figures are released as well by Edison. So look out for that in an upcoming episode. But just from a high-level point of view, Nicole, what were some of the main takeaways?
Yeah, awareness was interesting. It was up from 70 to 75%, which equates to 212 million people that are now aware of podcasts, which is brilliant. Radio numbers, so people owning physical radios, still continue to drop and are replaced with smart speakers. A lot more people have smart speakers in the home. And in comparison to social media, which is pretty flat, podcasting is still growing steadily. So all tracking upwards, which is good.
Yes, it comes as no surprise that podcasting is still heading skyward, which is terrific. And we, as I said, we'll come back and we'll dig a bit deeper into those stats and pull out some other really interesting data when we speak to Edison Research soon. Well, that's it for this episode of Podcasting Essentials. Thanks, as always, Nicole, for joining me, and do your best to stay healthy.
Thanks, Dick. It's always a pleasure to be here, even though we're not in the same room. But you stay safe, and to everyone listening, stay safe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look after each other.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions about what you've heard on this episode, or you'd just like to chat to us about podcasting during these unprecedented times, we'd love to hear from you. Or you can go to our website at be.com.au. From all of us at Be Media Production, thanks so much for listening.